3 weeks after leaving the hospital, I invited my entire family to a welcome home party. Everyone smiled, everyone laughed, everyone pretended they were happy I had survived. Then, my stepmother stood in the middle of my living room, looked at my girlfriend from head to toe, and loudly said, "I can't believe this is the kind of woman you brought into our family." The room fell silent. My girlfriend lowered her head, trying not to cry. Everyone waited for me to defend her. Instead, I smiled, walked toward the microphone, tapped my glass, and said something that ended the party forever. If you love emotional family dramas filled with betrayal, suspense, unforgettable twists, and satisfying endings, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Every week, we bring powerful stories that prove respect is earned, not demanded. Now, let me tell you how my own stepmother humiliated the woman I loved, and why she regretted every single word before the night was over. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm 31 years old. 6 months ago, I thought the hardest battle of my life was surviving a terrible car accident. I was wrong. Recovering from surgery was easier than discovering who truly respected me. When I was 12, my mother passed away after a long illness. Losing her changed everything. For almost 2 years, it was just Dad and me. Then, he married Linda. At first, she acted kind. She bought me birthday gifts, packed my school lunches, called me sweetheart. I honestly believed she wanted to be my second mom, but that kindness slowly disappeared, especially after she had her own son. From that day forward, there were 2 different sets of rules in our house, one for my stepbrother and another for me. If he broke something, it was an accident. If I made the smallest mistake, I was careless. When he got good grades, the whole family celebrated. When I graduated at the top of my class, Linda simply said, "Don't think you're special." Dad rarely argued with her, not because he agreed, because he hated conflict. Every time he stayed silent, she became a little bolder. By the time I turned 25, I'd moved out, started my own architecture firm, bought a beautiful house just outside Seattle, built a life completely on my own. Linda never congratulated me. Instead, she told relatives, "Ethan just got lucky." Funny, luck had apparently worked overtime, because every promotion, every client, every success came after years of 16-hour workdays. Then, about a year ago, I met Emma Collins. She wasn't impressed by expensive restaurants or luxury cars. She volunteered every Saturday at a children's hospital. She remembered the names of waiters. She always thanked cashiers. She had the kind of kindness that couldn't be faked. For the first time since losing my mother, life felt peaceful. When I introduced Emma to my family, everyone loved her. Everyone except Linda. She criticized everything. Emma's dress, her hairstyle, the way she spoke, even the homemade dessert Emma brought for Thanksgiving. Linda smiled while saying cruel things. The kind of smile that hurts more than shouting. Emma never fought back. She'd quietly squeeze my hand under the table, as if reminding me, some battles aren't worth starting. 3 months later, everything changed. A drunk driver crossed the center line. The crash nearly killed me. Broken ribs, a shattered shoulder, internal injuries. Doctors weren't sure I'd survive the first night. Emma never left the hospital. She slept in uncomfortable waiting room chairs. She held my hand through surgeries. She read my favorite books while I drifted in and out of consciousness. Meanwhile, Linda visited exactly twice. Each visit lasted less than 10 minutes. She spent more time taking phone calls than talking to me. Even the nurses noticed. One of them whispered, "That young woman loves you with her whole heart." She pointed toward Emma. I smiled. I know. After nearly a month, the doctors finally discharged me. Walking still hurt. Lifting anything heavier than a grocery bag was impossible. But I was alive. Emma drove me home. As we pulled into my driveway, She smiled. You made it. I looked at my house. For the first time, it felt different. Not because I'd almost lost it, because I finally understood who had stood beside me when life became difficult. A few days later, I had an idea. I want to host a dinner. Emma looked surprised. A celebration? I nodded. Not just a celebration. A thank you. For everyone who supported me. She smiled. I think they'll love that. I smiled too. But for a very different reason. Because this wasn't just a party. It was the first time. Everyone I cared about would be together under one roof. My father, Linda, my stepbrother, close friends, business partners, neighbors, and Emma. I wanted to see something. Would Linda finally show Emma the respect she deserved, after everything we'd been through? Or would she reveal who she really was, in front of everyone? I didn't tell Emma what I was thinking. I simply kept planning. Good food, live music, beautiful decorations, a photographer. Nearly 50 guests accepted the invitation. Linda even called me. I'm so excited. I can't wait to meet all your important friends. I smiled politely. So can I. Because by the end of that evening, every single one of those guests would see the real Linda Walker. And once the truth came out, nothing in our family would ever be the same again. The night of the party finally arrived. My backyard looked beautiful. Soft string lights hung between the trees. Fresh flowers decorated every table. A live jazz band played quietly near the patio. Friends from my company, neighbors, hospital staff, and family members slowly filled the yard. For the first time in weeks, I actually felt alive again. Emma walked downstairs wearing a simple navy blue dress. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She never did. She looked elegant without trying. When she smiled at me, every scar from the accident felt a little less painful. You look nervous, she whispered. I laughed. Maybe a little. She squeezed my hand. Whatever happens tonight, we'll face it together. Those words reminded me exactly why I loved her. Dad arrived first. He hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, son. It's good to have you home. For a moment, everything felt normal. Then Linda's SUV pulled into the driveway. She stepped out wearing an expensive designer dress. Behind her came my stepbrother, Jason. Linda looked around the property with obvious surprise. I forgot how big this place is, Jason whistled. Must be nice having money. I smiled politely. Hard work has its rewards. Linda forced a smile, but I noticed the irritation in her eyes. The evening began peacefully. Guests laughed. Children played in the garden. People congratulated me on my recovery. Several doctors from the hospital attended. My business partners thanked Emma for taking care of me. Everyone seemed genuinely happy, except Linda. She spent the entire evening quietly watching Emma, almost studying her, waiting for an opportunity. About an hour later, dinner was served. Everyone gathered around the long outdoor tables. Emma helped the catering staff serve elderly guests before serving herself. One of my employees whispered, "She's incredible." I smiled proudly. I know. Linda overheard. Her expression immediately changed. Halfway through dinner, one of my friends raised a glass. To Ethan and to Emma, the woman who never left his side. Everyone applauded. Emma blushed. She hated being the center of attention. Then, Linda slowly stood up. She picked up her wine glass. I'd like to say something too. The applause faded. Everyone turned toward her. She smiled. But I recognized that smile. It was the same smile she'd worn for nearly 20 years, right before saying something cruel. She looked directly at Emma. So, you're Ethan's girlfriend. Emma smiled politely. Yes. Linda slowly looked her up and down. Then she laughed. I honestly expected someone a little more refined. The backyard became completely silent. Emma's smile disappeared. Linda wasn't finished. That dress looks rather inexpensive. I suppose not everyone understands proper etiquette. Several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Dad quietly whispered, "Linda." But she ignored him. She continued, "You seem like a nice girl. But Ethan has worked too hard to end up with someone ordinary." Emma lowered her eyes. She quietly placed her fork on the table. I could see she was trying not to cry. One of the nurses who had cared for me in the ICU stood up. "Excuse me." Emma spent nearly every day at the hospital. She barely slept. Linda shrugged. "That doesn't make her the right woman." Another guest added, "She's one of the kindest people I've ever met." Linda simply smiled. Kindness doesn't belong in high society. The silence became unbearable. I looked around the yard. Nearly 50 people. Every single one. Watching. Waiting. Some expected me to argue. Others expected Emma to leave. Instead, Emma quietly stood. "I think I'll go inside." I gently took her hand. "No." She looked at me. I smiled softly. "You've done nothing wrong." She slowly sat back down. Linda folded her arms. "What? You actually think she belongs here?" I calmly answered, "Absolutely." She laughed loudly. "Then prove it." The challenge echoed through the yard. I slowly stood up, walked toward the small stage where the musicians had been playing, picked up the wireless microphone, tapped it twice. The speakers carried the sound across the entire backyard. Everyone became completely silent. Even the band stopped playing. Linda smiled confidently. She thought I was about to defend Emma. She had no idea. I had been planning this moment for weeks. I looked around at every guest, friends, neighbors, doctors, employees, business partners, and finally, my family. I took a slow breath. Then I smiled. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight." Linda relaxed. She thought the moment had passed. It hadn't even begun. Because the next words out of my mouth were about to change every relationship in that backyard forever. And before the night was over, Linda would realize that humiliating Emma was the biggest mistake she'd ever made. I looked around the backyard. Nearly 50 people, all waiting for me to speak. The music had stopped. The laughter was gone. Even the wind felt still. I took a slow breath. Then I smiled. First, I'd like to thank every person who stood beside me while I was fighting for my life. My eyes found Emma. When I couldn't walk, she carried me. When I couldn't eat, she fed me. When doctors couldn't promise I'd survive, she never left. Several nurses quietly nodded. They had seen it with their own eyes. I turned toward my guests. Many people think love is measured by expensive gifts. I don't. I believe love is measured by who stays, when there's nothing to gain. The backyard remained silent. Then, I slowly turned toward Linda. My stepmother asked whether Emma belongs in this family. I smiled. Tonight, I'm finally ready to answer. Linda folded her arms confidently. I'm listening. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out a small velvet box. Emma looked completely confused. So did everyone else. I walked toward her, knelt down carefully because my injuries still hadn't fully healed. She immediately whispered, "Ethan, what are you doing?" I smiled. The best decision of my life. I opened the box. Inside was the engagement ring I'd bought months before my accident. Gasps echoed across the yard. Emma covered her mouth. Tears instantly filled her eyes. I looked directly at her. "Emma Collins, you loved me before I had scars. You loved me when I couldn't even stand. You never cared about my house, my business, my money. You only cared whether I opened my eyes each morning." I took a deep breath. "Will you marry me?" She couldn't even speak. She simply nodded over and over again, then through tears. Yes. The backyard erupted into applause. Several guests stood to their feet. Even the band members clapped. I gently slipped the ring onto her finger. She hugged me carefully, trying not to hurt my healing ribs. I love you, she whispered. I love you too. For a brief moment, nothing else mattered. Then, Linda laughed sarcastically. So that's your big surprise? I still don't think she's good enough. The applause stopped. Everyone looked back toward her. Dad quietly whispered, Linda, please stop. But she ignored him. I slowly turned around. No, that wasn't the surprise. Her smile faded. What do you mean? I nodded toward the projector screen set up beside the stage. I have something else I'd like everyone to see. Jason looked confused. What is this? I picked up a remote control, pressed one button. The screen came to life. Security camera footage appeared. The date stamp showed 2 weeks earlier, inside my house. Linda and Jason had come over while I was still in the hospital. Everyone watched in stunned silence. The video showed Linda opening drawers, looking through office files, searching my desk, opening my safe. Then Jason said, We need to find the property documents before Ethan gets home. Linda answered, If Emma marries him, she'll end up with everything. We can't let that happen. The entire backyard fell silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Another clip began. Linda laughed. Once Ethan signs everything over someday, we'll finally have this house. My business partner slowly stood. Are you serious? One of the nurses covered her mouth. Dad's face turned completely pale. Linda panicked. That's not what it looks like. I calmly replied. It looks exactly like what everyone just watched. Jason stood up angrily. You recorded us? I nodded. My home security system records 24 hours a day. You forgot that. Dad slowly looked at Linda. Did you really do this? She couldn't answer. For the first time in 20 years, she had nothing to say. I reached into another envelope. There is one final announcement. Sarah, my attorney, walked onto the stage. She smiled politely. As Ethan's legal representative, I've been asked to make something official. Everyone turned toward her. Ethan has transferred full ownership of this home into a family trust. Linda suddenly smiled. I knew it. Sarah continued reading. The only beneficiaries are Ethan Walker, his future wife Emma Walker, and any children they may have. Linda's smile disappeared instantly. The trust specifically prevents anyone else from claiming ownership, Jason whispered. What? Sarah calmly closed the folder. It cannot be challenged. Linda's face turned bright red. You planned all of this? I nodded. No. I planned a celebration. You created the lesson. Dad slowly walked toward Emma. He looked ashamed. I'm sorry. I should have stopped this years ago. Emma smiled gently. I know. He hugged her. Then he hugged me. I'm proud of you, son. Those were words I'd waited my entire life to hear. Linda quietly picked up her purse. So, we're leaving. No one stopped her. Not a single guest. As she walked toward the gate, she realized something she'd never experienced before. Silence. No sympathy. No supporters. Just the consequences of her own choices. Jason followed without saying a word. They never even said goodbye. The band began playing again. My friends started talking. People smiled once more. The tension disappeared. One of my doctors laughed. Well, that's certainly the most unforgettable recovery party I've ever attended. Everyone laughed, including me. 6 months later, Emma and I were married. It wasn't a huge wedding, just close friends, family who truly cared, and the nurses who helped save my life. Dad attended alone. He had divorced Linda after discovering even more lies about money and manipulation. Before the ceremony, he handed Emma a small photo. It was a picture of my late mother. "I think she would have loved you." Emma cried. "So did I." Today, our home is peaceful, filled with laughter, not arguments, filled with love, not control. Sometimes, life removes people from your journey, not to punish you, but to protect your future. Losing toxic family members isn't always a tragedy. Sometimes, it's the beginning of the life you deserved all along. If this story reminded you that true love stands beside you during your hardest days, not just your best ones, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, the people who try to embarrass those you love often reveal far more about themselves than they ever do about the person they're attacking. The end.